First to Pakistan. Just a few days ago, protests right outside capital Islamabad led to the resignation of the country's law minister. The army and the ISI's involvement in the truce deal was a rather open secret. But the Tehreek-e-Labbaik, the group that led the protests, today put the facts on record, exposing Pakistan's military.
Soon after the Islamist protests ended in Islamabad, a Pakistani army ranger was caught on tape handing out 1,000 rupees in cash to the Tehreek-e-Labbaik protesters. Tehreek-e-Labbaik's chief, Khadim Hussain Rizvi, has now confirmed what was being said all along. The military made the former law minister Zahid Hamid resign.
The talks had failed, then the army intervened. My members of Tehreek interacted with the army and the ISI generals. They said your demands will be met. They ensured Zahid Hamid's resignation.
Some analysts in Pakistan believe that this sets a dangerous precedent as it legitimizes hardliners in Pakistan.
The true tragedy of it, I think, is the fact that the civilians had all the power to negotiate this. They had the power to resolve this peacefully, amicably. They had a lot of time to set up negotiations. They had a lot of time to speak to these people and try and figure out a solution that everyone could agree to. But they didn't. And in Pakistan, it seems that the army is now brought in to solve just about every situation that the civilian government is technically responsible for.
The Tehreek-e-Labbaik is a hardline Islamic political party which is trying to create space for itself in mainstream politics. In the recent Lahore by-election, the party won more than 7,000 votes. So why is the military helping the radicals out? Tehreek-e-Labbaik's efforts to enter politics are well supported by the country's military establishment. While the army denies its tacit support to such groups, it has on several occasions made a pitch to mainstream radicals in the country. Bureau Report, WION.
Islamabad's weeks-long siege by the fundamentalist Tehreek-e-Labbaik against an allegedly blasphemous law minister has ended after the army deployed its 111 brigade and the Pakistan government bowed meekly to all demands made by the Islamist group in an agreement. The ground situation in Pakistan is strongly reminiscent of the 4 coups staged in the past 70 years. Senior foreign editor Padma Rao reads the signs this time and asks, is Pakistan on the verge of another military takeover?
Hafiz Sayeed, one of the world's most wanted Islamist terrorists, has been freed. He is preparing his newly formed political party for the general election next year. An elected prime minister has been sacked on corruption charges. An Islamist group has held the capital Islamabad to ransom for weeks with nationwide support from fundamentalists. A shaky caretaker government has collapsed like a failed souffle, called in the army and agreed to all demands made by the Islamists. And now, the latest, an exiled general waiting in the wings for political support to return to Pakistan has just sent signals of love to global terrorist Saeed. To Shakespeare, the Pakistani skies would seem to be blazing forth the death of democracy. In other words, the best weather conditions prevail for a military takeover of Pakistan. Army Chief General Qamar Bajwa was considered a moderate. Indeed, he was elevated to that role by the disgraced Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif because the latter perceived no threat from Bajwa. But that may be the general's biggest disadvantage now. There are few Pakistanis who hold Sharif in any esteem right now. Importantly, some Sharif haters are those army seniors who were ignored by the ex-PM in favour of Bajwa for the highest military post. The army's other arm, the ISI, is also marbled with fundamentalist veins. The country's 111 brigade is already in position, ostensibly to ensure the smooth withdrawal of protesters. But they themselves are yet to return to their barracks. All stakeholders in the general election slated August 2018 seem anxious to bear their respective positions on television. Like Islamabad's chief protester Khadim Rizvi, who has just confirmed the closeness between radicals and the army, which seems to be inching closer in this way to power in Pakistan. Listen in.
इनसे तो हमने कहा आपसे बात ही नहीं हो सकती। फिर फौज दरमियान में पड़ी, हमारे साथी जो मुज़ाकरात वाले थे, तो उन्होंने किया मुज़ाकरात। हमारी पार्टी वो साथी हैं हमारे, उन्होंने की है, तारीख की है। किसके साथ? फौज के साथ ही की है, वो ISI के कोई बड़े होंगे, जनरल वगैरह, और जिनके साइन है मुआहदे में, शायद वही है, उन्हीं के साथ। तो क्या उनके साथ फिर कैसे किसी नतीजे पे? उन्होंने कहा जो आप कहते हैं आपकी बात मंजूर करवाते हैं। अच्छा, यानी जाहिद हामिद का इस्तीफा उन्होंने दिलवाया? उन्होंने दिलवाया।
There was a clear and present hint of his popularity when tens and thousands of supporters greeted global terrorist Hafiz Sayeed when he was released. And via television, he just received another unexpected boost to his fortunes from former coup leader and President Pervez Musharraf, who expressed admiration for the Kashmir terror wrought by Saeed's group, the Lashkar-e-Taiba, and its so-called humanitarian arm. Musharraf was exiled on charges of treason by his nemesis Nawaz Sharif, whom he had toppled in a coup himself. But none other than General Raheel Sharif, the army chief who just retired and made way for Bajwa, had helped Musharraf flee the country. Obviously, there is more than a modicum of support for Musharraf within the Pakistan army. But to return to Pakistan and possibly political power, Musharraf will also need Pakistan's Islamist militants, especially the object of his affection and admiration, Hafiz Sayeed's Lashkar-e-Taiba, whose solitary goal is the genocide of Indians to claim India's Jammu and Kashmir. Padma Rao, WION.
Pakistan has been ruled for more than half of its lifespan by its army. And if there is one entity that has maintained control over all forms of Islamist militants in Pakistan, it is the men in uniform. Let's take a look at Pakistan's long history under military rule, under which observers say the country has enjoyed the maximum stability. The situation on the ground was perfect for a military takeover. There was widespread dissatisfaction over Pakistan's 1956 constitution. The country saw a flurry of prime ministers, 4 of them in 2 years. The president, himself an army general, declared martial law and appointed General Ayub Khan as prime minister. The latter usurped all powers and ruled for 11 years, forcing the president to resign. Turmoil again over the results of elections in East and West Pakistan. General Yahya Khan took over, delayed sharing power with Sheikh Mujibur Rahman in Dhaka, and the freedom movement swelled. Bangladesh was born. This general ruled only for 2 years before he handed over power to Zulfikar Ali Bhutto and remained under house arrest himself. Another election, more turmoil, convincing Pakistan's army yet again that martial law was the only answer. General Zia-ul Haq took over, arrested, tried and executed Prime Minister Zulfikar Ali Bhutto. The general is the longest-serving head of state in Pakistan so far. His brand of martial law was considered strict but modern. General Zia also encouraged religious fundamentalism in that country. Pakistan enjoyed a stable GDP and the maximum economic prosperity under this general. Barely 11 years after General Zia's era, tensions surfaced between Pakistan's civilian government under Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif and his army chief, General Pervez Musharraf, in a dramatic turn of events. As General Musharraf's plane was preparing to land in Pakistan, his army loyalists arrested the Prime Minister and declared martial law. Musharraf declared himself president in 2001 and won himself another 5 years in office through a controversial referendum in 2002. Pakistan's economy, we have to say, improved under his rule. So did liberal social values. But he fled abroad to escape impeachment and charges of treason. He remains overseas, announcing his return to Pakistan politics every now and then. Welcome back. North Korea's latest missile launch was announced with the usual bombast, the sort that has accompanied the announcement of all its military achievements. The Hwasong-15, after all, has only become part of Pyongyang's well-stocked arsenal. Not a lot is known about the Hwasong-15, given that it was test-fired just earlier today. But as per North Korean state media, it has a range of 13,000 kilometers. It's also the North's most powerful weapon yet. Experts believe it could possibly reach Washington. The North's arsenal also includes the Hwasong-14, which was test-fired first in July this year. Pyongyang claimed it was capable of reaching the US mainland. The 14 has a maximum estimated range of 10,400 kilometers and is reportedly capable of carrying a high explosive or nuclear payload. The North also has an intermediate range ballistic missile or IRBM called the Hwasong-12. It's 17.4 meters in length, and has an estimated range of 4,500 kilometers, which places the US territory of Guam within striking distance. The Hwasong 10 is another IRBM, but its range is a shade lesser than that of the 12, maxing 3,500 kilometers. Also called the Musudan, the 10 has reportedly failed 7 times out of 8 when it was tested. Pyongyang has also developed a number of long-range rockets. These are ostensibly for delivering satellites to space. But many have called the space program a cover for testing ICBMs. The UNHA-3 is a 3-stage SLV with an estimated range of 10,000 kilometers. Kim Jong-un's arsenal also includes a number of short-range ballistic missiles, or SRBMs. Most of these are based on Soviet Scud-type designs. These are mainly short to medium-range missiles. They're small in size and can be fired from mobile launchers, making them harder to detect. The Nodong or Rodong is a medium-range ballistic missile. It's 16 meters long and has an estimated range of 1,500 kilometers. These can be fired from mobile launchers and are capable of delivering nuclear payloads and high explosives. Among the North's submarine-launched ballistic missiles, or SLBMs, is the Pukukson G, or the KN-11. It has a range of around 1,200 kilometers. The missile has seen multiple launches since 2015. A land-based variant called the Pukukson 2 was test fired in February this year. Now, North Korea's missile test overnight shows that they can now target all of the US mainland. But what about other countries? What damage can North Korea do even without nuclear weapons?
North Korea's military has numerical advantage over the south and is deployed close to the demilitarized zone that marks the boundary between the two Koreas. Many experts believe North Korean artillery and rocket forces could level Seoul within hours of outbreak of a conflict. But Seoul is 40 kilometers from the DMZ and can only be reached by the North's longest range artillery pieces. Firing would betray their positions and leave them vulnerable to an attack by the South. Besides, South Korea has a qualitative edge and is of course backed up by the extensive strike power of the US military. But the North has an extensive chemical arsenal, possibly also biological weapons, and is said to have developed a cyber attack capability as well. It's evident that Japan, especially the country's south and the west, is in direct line of a North Korean threat. Pyongyang has short and medium-range ballistic missiles which could hit Fukuoka and Hiroshima. Also, the US itself has many service people posted in both South Korea and Japan. But risking an all-out war with the United States would play to Washington's advantages. North Korea is an isolated and impoverished country. For the regime, the missile program is the ultimate insurance policy. But it would not survive an ensuing conflict. The risk now is of mistake and miscalculation. Bureau Report, WION.
North Korea's missile crossed Japan, flying through international airspace. Now, many are asking the question, can missiles hit a plane packed with ordinary travelers?
It's not the first time that North Korea carried out a missile test without a warning. In September, a passenger who landed at Osaka airport in Japan following a similar missile test tweeted about an announcement on the aircraft. Now, a South Korean airline has said captains of 2 of its passenger planes saw flashes believed to be from North Korea's latest missile launch. Both planes were flying over Japan and reported the sightings to ground control. The planes were headed for South Korea's Incheon airport, one from San Francisco, the other from Los Angeles. Both planes landed safely. There have been incidents like the shooting down of Malaysian Airlines flight MH17 over Ukraine, which means that airlines are aware of the risks of one of their planes getting misidentified in or near contested airspace. But what about the risk to civilian aircraft flying in the area? Just last week, Air China suspended flights between Beijing and North Korea, ostensibly due to lack of demand. Many airlines are changing their flight paths to avoid flying over North Korea or the area between North Korea and Hokkaido. In early August, Air France expanded their no-fly zone around North Korea after one of their aircraft came within 100 kilometers of one of North Korea's previous missile tests. Air France flights to Tokyo and Osaka are now taking between 10 to 30 minutes longer because they are trying to go around the North Korean test area. The probability of a civilian aircraft being hit is low, but the risk does exist. For one, North Korea tests without warning. And though it calibrates its tests so the missiles fly over the thinnest part of Japan, there is always a possibility of the missile going awry or disintegrating. Bureau Report, WION.
Let's shift focus to another country which has more than its fair share of intrigue, Saudi Arabia. Senior Saudi Prince Mutayib bin Abdullah, who was among the many arrested on charges of corruption, has been freed on a $1 billion settlement. A Saudi official has confirmed that Prince Mutayib was released on Tuesday after reaching what he called an acceptable settlement. The amount of the settlement is believed to be equivalent to $1 billion. Prince Mutayib was the most politically influential royal detained in the Saudi corruption crackdown. The 65-year-old is the son of former King Abdullah and was once seen to be a contender for the throne. He is a cousin of Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman and headed Saudi Arabia's elite National Guard. Mutayib was accused of embezzlement and awarding contracts to his own firms, including a $10 billion deal for walkie-talkies. There may soon be others like him. Reports say Saudi authorities have been working on striking agreements with some of those in detention, asking them to hand over cash and assets in return for their freedom. In an interview to the New York Times last week, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman was quoted as saying that the vast majority of about 200 businessmen and officials implicated in the crackdown had agreed to settlements under which they would hand over assets to the government. It is believed that apart from Prince Mutayib, at least 3 other people allegedly involved in corruption cases have also finalized such agreements. While the arrests were referred to as a crackdown on corruption, many analysts said that the purge was an attempt by the Crown Prince to consolidate power. Many observers believe that Prince Mutayib was the primary target of the purge. He was the head of the 100,000-strong National Guard, and he represented the last great power centre left standing after the toppling of the former Crown Prince Mohammed bin Naif. He also was the last remaining member of Abdullah's Shamar branch of the family to retain a key position at the top of the Saudi power structure. So, Saudi Arabia's crackdown on corruption could actually turn out to be a major boost for the kingdom's coffers. Prince Mutayib bin Abdullah, as we said, is the first high-profile individual to bail his way out of the Ritz-Carlton Hotel Golden Prison. Details of the negotiation have not been revealed, but media reports say the Saudi investigators are demanding prisoners to give back 70% of their net worth, a sum which could well be in billions given the status of some of those arrested. Take a look at this list. The most famous prisoner is Al-Walid bin Talal. He's the most famous Arab in the business world and is believed to be sitting on a $16 billion net worth. Walid Al-Ibrahim, chairman of the Middle East Broadcasting Center, has also been arrested. His net worth is believed to be close to $11 billion. The chairman of the Saudi Bin Laden Group, the kingdom's largest construction group, Bakr bin Laden too, is under arrest. The Bin Laden family is believed to be sitting on $5 billion worth of assets. Prince Turki bin Abdullah, the deputy governor of Riyadh, is believed to have allotted some of his own companies part of a multi-billion-dollar deal for a rapid transit project. Ibrahim Abdulaziz Al-Assaf, former finance minister, is also on this blacklist. During his period in office, he was the center of the network of the kingdom's investments. He was also on the board of Saudi Arabia's oil company Aramco. Prince Turki bin Nasser, head of the presidency of the Met and Environmental Department, is accused of having taken cuts worth tens of millions of dollars through the 80s and the 90s from arms deals that he led. He owns luxury houses in the US, Spain and the UK. Saudi Arabia's Attorney General said that he's investigating corruption practices worth nearly $100 billion. Getting back 70% of such a sum will certainly benefit Saudi Arabia's coffers, which have been depleting due to lowering oil prices. And tracking the story for us on WION is my colleague Daniele Pagani. He's joining us live this evening. Good evening, Daniele. What is going on? Is this a crackdown on corruption, or is it the state officially extorting money from some of the former royals? Daniele, my question to you is, does it look like a corruption crackdown that Riyadh wants the world to believe it is, or is this an extortion policy made official?
Well, I would say both, in the sense that it is pretty well known that the echelon of power in Saudi Arabia have relied on a massive amount of corruption to the expenses of the kingdom's coffer. The most well-known practice was overcharging an extreme amount of money to the kingdom's coffers in order to obtain projects. So this is absolutely, and I would say, an open secret. So there is obviously a component of a crackdown against corruption. Nevertheless, as you correctly pointed out, there is also a sense of these being a sort of state extortion, because if someone is undergoing a trial for corruption, there must be a trial, there must be a judgment, there must be, you must work within the frame of law. And this is not happening. It seems that there are kind of private settlements happening between the Saudi authorities and the princes and the functionaries and the high-profile people who are currently held prisoners. So this is definitely going to help the kingdom's coffers, but when it comes to the rule of law, it's definitely murky or shady, not very transparent, I would say.
Daniele, is there clarity on the terms of this release? After having paid $1 billion, is this prince free to do what he wants to do? Are there still some checks and balances on him? What kind of influence do these people wield? Do they still remain potential challengers to the throne?
Well, in case of the prince who was recently released, I don't think he is a problem anymore. And that's why he actually managed to walk free after paying $1 billion. The terms and conditions of the agreement, as all the system of justice in Saudi Arabia, when it comes to the echelon, when it comes to the House of Saud, is obviously not open. We will never know. It has been also pretty difficult to understand. Actually, it is impossible to understand who exactly are all the princes and all the functionaries and all the people who are currently detained. It is not in public domain. This is very much something that the PIX portrays, how in Saudi Arabia justice is carried on. So to answer your question, I don't think he poses a threat anymore to the Saudi Crown Prince, because the most powerful military body, the National Guard, which is formed out of elements coming from tribes very much attached and faithful and close to the House of Saud, is not in his hands anymore. It was the last military branch that Mohammed bin Salman, the newly elected crown prince, could not control. So no, he is a free man without a significant amount of power right now.
Interesting. Thanks very much, Daniele. We'll leave it at that, and we'll tell our viewers how it all began. At the beginning of this month, Saudi Arabia conducted a massive crackdown on corruption, so big that as many as 11 princes were arrested. Analysts had called it a significant move as Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman cements his grip on power. Here's what's been happening in the country over the past few months. Developments that make observers ask whether Saudi Arabia is indeed being reshaped. In June, King Salman removed his nephew and appointed his son Mohammed as the crown prince, the next in line to the Saudi throne. On the day he was appointed, US President Donald Trump called him up to congratulate him. The same month, Saudi Arabia sparked a diplomatic crisis by leading an air, land and sea blockade of Qatar by Arab countries in an attempt to get it to cut its alleged connections with terrorism and distance itself from Iran. The crown prince then made efforts to rebrand his ultra-conservative kingdom, declaring a return to moderate Islam after his father announced a decree to allow women to drive for the first time in the country's history. Then, in early November, within hours of the formation of an anti-corruption body, prominent princes, political and business leaders were held. All of them were imprisoned in the luxury Ritz-Carlton. Now, the first of these detainees has been freed at a reported cost of $1 billion. Welcome back. High drama at the United Nations War Crimes Court in The Hague. A wartime commander of Bosnian Croat forces committed suicide inside a UN court. The 72-year-old accused drank poison after the UN appeals judge upheld his 20-year sentence for war crimes against Bosnian Muslims. This video on your screen from the courtroom shows the shock as the accused takes a vial out and gulps down the material in it. An ambulance was immediately called and paramedics rushed in, but the accused could not be saved.
Stop, please. Please sit down.
Notre client dit qu'il a bu un poison ce matin.
Okay.
Slobodan Praljak was one of the 6 former Bosnian Croat political and military leaders who were appealing their sentences in The Hague. He was originally sentenced in 2013 for his involvement in a campaign to drive Muslims from Bosnia in the early 1990s.
Okay. We suspend the...
Now to some positive news, and this is good news for the Indian economy. Economic growth for the July to September quarter is likely to rebound from the downturn of the past 3 years, suggests a new poll. The details. After a downturn lasting 5 quarters, there's now more evidence of a rebound in the Indian economy. A poll of 52 economists conducted by the news agency Reuters predicts a surge in the growth rate of India to 6.4% in the July-September quarter. This comes weeks after a thumbs up from Moody's and a stable rating from Standard & Poor's, and just days ahead of the all-important elections in the state of Gujarat. Forecasts in the poll range from a growth of 5.9 to 6.8%. None of those polled expects the growth rate to come down. The Indian economy had witnessed a downturn after many years on the upswing. The growth was suppressed by demonetization of the currency and the goods and services tax reform. Shashank Mendiratha, an economist, has forecast 6.2% growth rate for the quarter. He wrote in the poll, and I quote, "India's GDP growth is expected to rebound, albeit at a slower pace, due to supply disruptions stemming from the goods and services tax. Growth was probably cushioned by festive demand and an uptick in industrial production." If the forecast matches data slated to be released by the Government of India on the 30th of November, it would indicate the beginning of an upturn in one of the world's fastest growing economies. Bureau Report, WION. There's a new love affair brewing across international borders. No, it's not the line of control, but between Dubai and Pakistan. Exiled former President Pervez Musharraf has expressed his admiration and support for none other than the man responsible for the 26/11 carnage in Mumbai, globally proscribed terrorist Hafiz Sayeed. The former army general is also grateful for the enormous support that Hafiz Sayeed's terror group, the Lashkar-e-Toiba, has provided in waging war in Kashmir. WION's Jessica Taneja and Padma Rao report.
लश्कर-ए-तैयबा को तो सबसे बड़ा सपोर्टर मैं हूं और मुझे मालूम है कि वो मुझे पसंद करते हैं.
It was a touching, true confession on a Pakistan television channel by the man responsible for infiltrating armed terrorists and instigating the Kargil war in India's Jammu and Kashmir. Pakistan's former coup leader and President Pervez Musharraf didn't stop there. He expressed his deep fondness for the chief of the Lashkar-e-Toiba, the terror group that also masquerades as a charitable organization called Jamaat-ud-Dawa. Waging jihad in Kashmir, as the LET is particularly fond of, came in for a special word of praise from the general in exile.
लश्कर-ए-तैयबा को तो सबसे बड़ा सपोर्टर मैं हूं और मुझे मालूम है कि वो मुझे पसंद करते हैं, लश्कर-ए-तैयबा वाले और ये जमात-उद-दावा वाले. तो
और आप भी उनको पसंद करते हैं, वो आपको पसंद करते हैं और आप उनको पसंद करते हैं.
मैं उनको पसंद करता हूं, बिल्कुल.
आप हाफिज सईद साहब को ही पसंद करते हैं आप.
Yes.
Pervez Musharraf is a man not known to mince his words. Indeed, by lauding the Jamaat-ud-Dawa's efforts to liberate Kashmir, he sent the land of his birth, India's capital Delhi, a flying kiss. In effect, he confirmed to India two things that have always been denied by Pakistani authorities: that the Lashkar and Jamaat are one and the same entity and both behind massive unrest in the Kashmir Valley.
क्योंकि मैं हमेशा कश्मीर में एक्शन के फेवर में रहा हूं और मैं हमेशा इनके फेवर में रहा हूं कि कश्मीर में ये इंडियन आर्मी को हमने दबाना है और ये सबसे बड़ा फोर्स है. वो इनको टेररिस्ट डिक्लेयर इंडिया ने करवा दिया अमेरिका के साथ मिलकर.
The interview has caused outrage among many in India.
मुझे लगता है ये अपने में इस बात का प्रमाण है कि सदा से ही पाकिस्तान एक नीतिबद्ध ढंग से वहां जो भी सरकार रही हो, भारतवर्ष में विशेषकर जम्मू कश्मीर में आतंकवाद को बढ़ावा देने का कार्य करती रही.
If Pervez Musharraf, the ex-president of Pakistan, openly says that he is a fan of Lashkar-e-Toiba and Hafiz Sayeed, then I think this is a clear indication that Pakistan government is totally sponsoring the terrorist activity.
Musharraf's statement, what we have got to do with Musharraf? He is a Pakistani. He toes the Pakistani line of supporting cross-border terrorism.
But the declaration of mutual love will be music to South Bloc's ears. More so because it was an affection denied by the same general on many previous occasions. After a lover's tiff in 2002 when the general had banned Lashkar in a fit of jealous pique, the lonely overseas exile now seems to be regretting that decision and longing to return, just in time for next year's election. And if all goes well, with a groundswell of support from groups like the Lashkar. After all, old love endures. Jessica Taneja with Padma Rao, WION.
Interestingly, this isn't the first time that Pervez Musharraf has stood up for Hafiz Sayeed, has praised his work. This is what he told me in an interview in April this year. Right after the travel ban, Hafiz Sayeed was put under house arrest. And it was seen as Pakistan's attempts to appease the US and say, look, we are doing our bit. Even though India questions and calls it a farce, the house arrest, because the business around Hafiz Sayeed and his party is still very much going on. But this is what is being seen as Pakistan's nervousness.
Let me surprise you that this Hafiz Sayeed issue is an issue in India, all right, not in the United States. I've been to the United States. I've met very important people.
They probably don't talk about it all the time, but he's on a list.
They talk about, maybe they talk about Haqqani, they will talk about Afridi, the person who's in jail because of his links with in the Osama bin Laden case. They don't talk about Hafiz Sayeed. It's India which keeps talking about
India has to, because he's behind 2611.
No, I don't think so. I don't think in Pakistan we don't call him a terrorist.
Yeah, you don't call him a terrorist. You call him a humanitarian worker. But have you seen the tapes that come out from his son?
One can do a lot of, when we talk of those tapes are all through one person in the Bombay incident at Kasab. These things are all managed by the intelligence.
There are tapes, sir, of these people, first Hafiz Sayeed and now his son, openly professing violence against India. How can it not be an issue for India?
No, they believe in supporting Kashmir, freedom struggle in Kashmir. That they support. I don't think they are talking of violence inside India.
They talk about war. They talk about going after India.
Well, I don't know. I wouldn't be able to comment.
You can watch the full interview on our website, WIONnews.com. We're wrapping up this edition of Gravitas, leaving you with stories from across the world.